Okay, sorry, let me just hit. Well, you're...
All right, ready? Cool. Trent, great to be with you.
Thank you for being here.
Yeah. I caught the video you published recently on the different arguments against atheism that different Christian apologists put together, and then
Yes.
also how the Catholic apologists would emphasize different things. And that kind of prompted me to shake off some cobwebs and really think, how would I try to approach the atheist today fresh if I just were to start over? And so
Sure.
if it's okay with you, this last week I've been working on a step-by-step method, kind of an argument for God, basically, that I'd like to run by you. And
Go
if you want to
ahead.
put on your hardcore atheist hat that's super skeptical and point out all my flaws,
Give it a try.
give it a try. All right.
Give it
Cool.
a try. All right.
And so at a high level, what I'm about to attempt here is let's say a transcendental ladder from consciousness to God. So step by step from our basic phenomena to being ultimately. And with each step, there's a certain rational inference or leap. And I suppose that's where the kinks would be tested, battle tested there. So
Right.
So, okay, step one, and if any time you say I disagree or here's where it's weak, please interrupt me and feel free to give me the challenge.
Sure. Okay.
Step one, I'm experiencing consciousness, have sense data, have thoughts, etc. Step two, my experience of the consciousness is differentiated. So it's not just one homogeneous blur, but there's actually distinction within my experience of consciousness.
Right.
And I can process in this differentiation, and I can navigate through that differentiation by acts, by conscious acts. I can engage in conscious acts, and specifically, a subset of those are intentional act types, so acts with intention. And there's three specific acts I'm talking about, which is to know or believe, to choose or desire, and to delight and be moved by something. So I have these three acts I can do, no matter what. So I can know, I can have a belief that I'm speaking with Trent Horn.
Okay.
I can desire it. I'm choosing, and you're choosing to sit down. I'm choosing to sit down here, and it's a good thing that I think it's happening. And I can even delight in it. This is a special moment for me. I get to be in your presence. And so I guess so far, are we okay, or would someone push back on that?
Well, right now, I think you're giving a general description of the different features of consciousness.
Yep.
So, and what's interesting of the three features you gave, I see three different kinds of arguments for God that kind of spiral off of them, or at least arguments against materialism. But I think this is a general account of consciousness, though I think it'll be important to distinguish human consciousness from other forms of consciousness, unless it's not necessary for the argument. But so far, I think keep going.
Okay, cool. So so I have these three conscious acts of intention that I can know, I can choose, I can delight. Those acts necessarily are relational. They require an object on the other side. I can't know in isolation or choose. I have to know something. I have to choose something. I have to delight in something. These acts require an object to attach to. And so relationally, that lets me transcend that. My consciousness kind of goes beyond just my own experience, but there's something that it's attaching to. So maybe existence of an external world or something separate from me. And then the next step here, that's an important one, is I also notice that when I engage in these conscious acts of knowing, choosing, and delighting, there are necessary success conditions that are attached to them. So when I'm engaging in the act of knowing, there's a implicit true-false threshold. Like there's a belief, and it's either assessed as being true or false. When I'm choosing, there's a better or a worse. There's always a better choice, worse choice. There's a good. And in delighting, there's a beauty, more beauty, less beauty, or more fittingness, less fittingness. And so there are success conditions that we cannot separate from these conscious acts of knowing, choosing, and delighting.
Okay.
So far, do you think? Okay.
Yeah. So I think right now you're still giving a general description of like epistemology.
Yep.
So yeah, although I would say the success conditions for knowledge are going to be much more complicated than just having a true or false belief.
Sure.
So that's going to go beyond that. But yeah, there's going to be, in order to say one has knowledge, there's a variety of conditions that have to ensue, which are debated among philosophers. To be choosing something, this is getting into a little bit of free will territory. There's going to be other successful conditions to say one has chosen something. But so far, we're laying the groundwork for basic epistemology, metaphysics of the will. Let's rock on.
Rock on. All right. So now these success conditions are instance transcending principles. So, and I suppose it's going to be concrete here, but if I evaluate that is a camera, that proposition, for me to say that that proposition is true means that I'm assessing it in light of some standard that is not contained within the particular instance that I'm describing, because I'm comparing the particular to a standard. So there's the standard of truth, the standard of good, the standard of beauty. Otherwise, I couldn't even make those assessments in the first place. The standards are what are the principles that make the success conditions possible in the first place. The fact I can recognize a success condition means that there are standards that exist, because otherwise the whole thing just wouldn't work.
Okay, what's interesting here is your argument seems to be merging two different arguments for the existence of God. One is, and I think that might be somewhat your intention here to do that. One is the transcendental argument that says that knowledge is possible, but if atheism is true, knowledge is impossible. Therefore, atheism is false because knowledge is possible. That would be like a kind of basic transcendental argument. And you're also combining it with something that's sort of like an argument from abstract objects or an argument from essences, like an idea that, okay, in order for me, it's not just knowledge that I have the ability to identify in like kind of like instantiations of these universals that we talk about, whether it's universal form of something or that what I'm talking about fulfills a universal category of something being true or being good or being beautiful. And that would also be very difficult, at the very least, on a materialistic worldview. So I think these arguments, and I'll let you keep going.
Sure. Yeah.
But I think they, even if they aren't whiz-bang arguments against atheism, they can be helpful arguments against materialism, and that sort of gets the job halfway done anyways when you're arguing for the existence of God. But that's kind of what I'm getting from where these arguments are going.
Yeah, no, fair enough. And I think right now, let's say if there's like 6 layers, we're still building at layer 3. We haven't gotten to the God aspect yet. But,
right, sure.
But what I would say is, in my view is that to undercut anything what I'm saying would necessarily be self-defeating, because I don't think you can refute any of the things I'm saying unless you're going to undercut your own ability to reason and argue.
That's what would happen at this point. Someone might just say, "Well, I'm just gonna affirm nominalism." You apply you're just going to apply an arbitrary label to that object. It's not an instantiation of anything. But I think what you're saying is that would lead to a real radical skepticism that would make life pretty unworkable.
Yeah, well, that's a great question. Yeah, what if I'm assigning the labels or not? So, okay, so now I guess the next step, that brings us to the next step is, so there's these standards that transcend the instance, but to your point, am I just projecting these standards where the standard is originating with me and I'm just kind of slapping it on?
Right.
Or am I receiving and measuring something that is separate from me? And so I think one way to maybe get around this is we observe across many instances, not just here's the camera, but through our use of memory, and when we see these multiple instances of truth claims, beauty claims, goodness claims, there is a corrigibility or a correctability. We calibrate. We notice that we can calibrate our beliefs. So, for example, if I have a belief that it's going to rain, and then maybe I look at some weather forecast, some radar, and I say, oh, it's actually not going to rain maybe 3 hours later. I'm calibrating. Mm-hmm. It's not that the truth is converted. It's I'm adjusting and I'm mapping into a territory. I have the map, the territory is there, rather than the other way around. So
right.
Here I'm just appealing to, again, basic observation where even if you have learning, improvement, judges converging, like we see this phenomena of judgment. So the person who's just going to argue it's all arbitrary projection, why would there be any convergence or improvement or calibration? Those concepts would be meaningless, I would think.
Right. You would only be describing how things are different, not them getting better or worse. So you would lose that sort of vertical ontological standard. So yeah, I think that's a successful way to rebut those kinds of ways to try to undercut the entire enterprise. What someone might do with a nominalist or a mereological, or the other escape route would be like mereological nihilism, one who says that there are no cameras, there are no people, there are only fundamental atoms that are arranged people-wise or camera-wise. But even there, the fact that we know that there's a possibility of them being arranged camera-wise or people-wise, I think starts to assume the essence is the very things people want to try to get away from. So I do think I don't think that works either to get around it.
Well, and if the nihilist is talking to me, he's kind of confessing he doesn't just see me as a Drago atom arrangement. He's talking to me as if I'm Drago, right? So it would just be, it seems like a disingenuous thing that you can't actually execute in your brain. You could just theoretically write the sentence, but it doesn't.
I mean, that's similar, I think, a lot of relativistic or nihilistic kinds of philosophies. They can work on paper and be consistent, but once you start to live them out, you really start to see all their inconsistencies. And They just don't map with what we know from human experience. So
I think to that point, it's like I can write any piece of code on the paper and, there it is. I wrote it on the paper, but to actually execute and run the code, it'll break as soon as it runs on hardware. And I think certain beliefs we can't actually execute.
Yeah.
It just doesn't work.
It's like I believe there's a pink elephant in the room. I can utter those words, but I actually can't have that mental state.
Yes.
Given the way the evidence is surrounding me.
Yes. Right on. So, okay, so we went from phenomena to external worlds to some perception of standards to then saying we can make contact with those standards. There's a measurement. So the next step is to move from these standards to aspects of reality. So I noticed that for any object, right, I can look at and can say this is what it is. Is it so? Is it knowable? What do I ought to do with it? And can I delight in it? So in other words, I perceive truth, goodness, and beauty in anything. In fact, any proposition I have is immediately subject to those knowing, choosing, and delighting acts. I can't even imagine something that wouldn't be touched by those three acts of intention. So therefore, we can start concluding that these standards are pervasive in reality, that, in the same way we're surrounded by light, and I don't see the light directly per se, but the fact that I can see all these objects, they're illuminated by the light. No matter what I look at, it would seem that it is being illuminated by the standards of truth, goodness, and beauty.
Right.
And so, I understand this gets a little more maybe hand-wavy, but it feels legitimate to me. I mean, what do you think about this jump?
Yeah, I think that for a lot of people, when it comes to premises like this, they'll either see them or they don't. Yeah. And it's going to, a lot of times in these kinds of arguments, if the premises appear to be true to people and their contrary has far less evidence, it's a successful premise, and I don't think there's been any logical fallacy to try to connect it to the previous arguments, to premises in the argument. So
okay, right on. So the next step would be to move us from aspects of reality to a source, and I think the way we could do that is through a couple of observations. So one is I notice a gradation of truth, goodness, and beauty. So something is more true versus less true. I can perceive this has more goodness, less. More beautiful, less, right? A Shakespearean play is more beautiful than a pile of trash floating in the Pacific Ocean. So I see that perceived gradation more and less. Also, I perceive it as defect. So if something is lacking truth, I don't just view it as different. It's defective. It's missing something. If something is, there's error, there's injustice, or there's kitsch. If it's losing beauty. So the fact that I see difference as gradation. I see a defect that implies that there's something that's not defectible, or at least for me to say something's defectible means that there's a non-defective, perhaps, standard. And lastly, if we were to say that, and this is where it gets trickier, but if there's a perfection, everything that's finite participates in that, in a limited sense, in that perfection, right? There's a limited perfections. And so all the instances of reality are borrowing from the lender, the source. The truth, goodness, and beauty is some kind of source that all the other instances are borrowing or partially participating in.
Now, it's interesting. Now your argument is starting to transition a little bit more into almost a kind of Platonic argument. We have to be careful. Platonism, well, the early church fathers liked it, but it also had some severe, it's antithetical to Christianity in also many other ways. But I think that there's a way of looking at it that kind of is subsumed into Aquinas's fourth way of knowing the existence of God,
Okay.
which is the argument, which he uses an argument from gradation and scale.
Oh, okay.
Going from recognizing gradations in being and goodness would naturally entail an ultimate fulfillment of being or goodness. But what's interesting, but the way you're doing it, if you add a transcendental argument to build it up more, because of the five ways, the fourth one tends to be the one that people have the hardest time wrapping their heads around for Aquinas' five ways. The first three are cosmological arguments. People, if they know what they're doing, usually get that. The fifth way is a design argument. Fourth is kind of a values argument. And so this gradations of being, it reminds me of that fourth way of Aquinas.
Like a fourth way of Aquinas. Okay. I'll have to
It's a little bit like
reference
that.
Okay.
Yeah.
Right on. Okay.
But it's good. You're on your way.
Okay. So fine. Let's say if we can kind of somewhat establish this concept of source that everything we observe in reality is inheriting from, and without having to maybe make it a Platonic realm, but just some concept of a perfection. Because again, how can I perceive defect if there isn't at least some perfection concept idea? So now here's perhaps maybe the riskiest move, but now when we move from the source to a plenitude of a fullness, infinite. Not just that this source is bigger than reality, but actually that it's like infinitely. So I would go back to the phenomenon layer of, okay, I can know or believe, I can choose and desire, I can delight, be moved by things. Those correspond to faculties that I have, right? Intellect, will, the heart, or the affective capability. So I have these faculties. And in the same way, if I'm physically hungry, hunger suggests that food exists, satiation exists. So a baby is born hungry before it ever sees food, but the food exists. Otherwise, where would the hunger come from? So now I say, well, I have these hungers, and I mean, with physical hunger, I can be full. I stuff my face. Now I'm satiated. With the hunger for knowledge, goodness, beauty, I get partially fulfilled. I'm consuming these things, right? The truth, goodness, beauty in these instances, but it feels infinite. It feels like there's no ceiling. And so my hunger seemingly could be has infinite capacity in some respects. And does that hunger then in the faculty require a proportionate object to satiate it? So infinite hunger, infinite satisfaction. So if that is not a cosmic joke, but that's a legitimate, I'm going to pretend that that's a real thing, right? And I guess here's where maybe it's more of a faith thing. But therefore we move from source of truth and goodness and beauty to like an infinite plenitude, the fullness of that.
These things. Now, this, what you are presenting to me seems to be it's a synthesis of several different kinds of arguments for God, because you have added yet another one, and that would be what's often called the argument from desire. C.S. Lewis gave an argument like this. Peter Kreeft's worked on it. Another Christian apologist whose name escapes me has written an entire book just on this argument, and the argument goes that nature does not give desires in vain, or every natural desire has a corresponding object to it, and there is a natural desire for perfect happiness, so therefore there must be a corresponding object for that desire. And so the biggest challenge of the argument is probably defending premise one. Every desire has an object to satisfy it. Nature doesn't create in vain, stuff like that. And we would think human beings don't have a natural desire to fly, and that makes sense. To fly by their own power, I should say, because we naturally cannot do that. Right. But we do have this natural desire for perfect happiness. But then there's other people, there's other objections that come, like many people have a natural desire to change the past, but that cannot happen. It's a logical impossibility. And then there's other ways around that. But I think that for many people, if you build this up from that these are not just fanciful thinking, but these are rooted in the core elements of our being, knowledge and truth and willing and acting, as you said earlier in the argument, it becomes much harder to hand wave them away as not natural desires. And that if these natural desires are part of our very being and ability to know reality, it would stand to reason they have an object, corresponding object to them. So,
okay.
Yeah.
Well, and you said two things briefly I want to respond to. So one is, interesting that you have, I can't change the past. Well, to me, if someone has that thought, regret doesn't make sense if there aren't any norms, right? If it's all just different.
Yes.
So, interestingly enough, but then
what we can say from that is there's a natural desire that the past had been different. than it was, and that it had been better, which is interesting. As that we want it to. It goes back to your thing about better and worse and the objectivity there.
Yeah, yeah, right. I mean, why regret anything if there's no actual standard?
Mm-hmm.
And even if from like a thin objectivity where we're going to assign different ends, and so the fact is, even if you assign for yourself what your aspired end is, there's still an objective ways of choosing one means is better at achieving that, right? Even if we disagree about the ends. But the other thing you said is, so from natural desire arguments, if those are like going from 0 to 100, and I haven't looked closely enough, I don't mean to straw man it, but maybe what a synthesis like this would do is, instead of going from 0 to 100, we've already kind of gotten you to like 80, 90, and the jump we're asking you to take isn't as vast compared to just saying, hey, I have a desire, it has to be filled, even though I do find that on its own compelling,
Right.
if that's fair.
Yeah.
Okay. And so then last, I suppose here, and maybe this is it's a lot harder for me to elaborate, but then you just get into the whole, essence, being stuff, truth, goodness, and beauty are aspects under being, and, everything that is. Ultimately, it's like you just see the different facets. But lastly, I would say is we're in this abstract realm of, say, people say, okay, fair enough, maybe these steps work. But I think then you can confirm it through phenomenological verification where, and we would agree, I think, as Catholics and anyone on these journeys, the more I consciously aim at truth, goodness, and beauty, the more I experience the satisfaction. I can actually perceive this hunger being filled.
Yeah.
So it further adds evidence to this whole chain of reasoning compared to not. So what do you think? If we had an atheist off the streets, instant conversion? Or
I think it would give him a lot to think about if he's
Yeah.
open-minded, to at least question simplistic materialism, to really help see realities a lot richer than he understands. And I think that's one of the first steps to helping people come to know God, is that they have to have a richer view of reality. Because if they have a very simple view of reality that we're just atoms collected around, you don't really need God to explain something like that. But as you explore reality and find its deeper mechanisms, and that applies to many other arguments for God, then the divine foundation of reality becomes much more plausible to people.
Is it fair that all these attempts that we're doing could be described as sort of a Trojan horse, like to get by this kind of fortress? This fortress, people don't want to believe in God, so we have to sneak in the thing. But then once the horse is in, you release, and then the direct experience of God happens. So all these arguments just fade away because now you're in direct content. You're tasting directly. But you have to sneak in the taste of God through these arguments philosophically.
Sure. The same as with the moral argument, with the design argument, to bring in something the person is not expecting. Like, oh, there's no God. The arguments to God are bad. But to get them to be like, oh, yeah, that is really surprising in an atheistic world.
Yeah.
It's a very surprising thing.
Yeah.
What gives from that? Then I like that Trojan horse, or getting the camel's nose under the tent would be another metaphor.
Yeah, Trojan horse is pretty negative usually. So
yeah, Trojan horse is a bit. The Trojan horse
Deceptive.
metaphor would be like a deceptive thing.
Yeah.
But the camel's nose under the tent is like, oh, we've got a foot in the door, and oh, now more can be considered.
I see. Right
Yeah.
on. Because I really do think it seems to me the whole enterprise is how can we get someone to gaze upon God, and for whatever reason their being is just not looking there. But if we can help nudge them through different ways that won't trigger their PTSD defensiveness about it, maybe we could have some success.
I hope so. We'll pray that we do it. And to each person, different things will appear successful to them. So we have to try a variety of methods to reach people.
Yeah. Amen.
All right.
Cool. Yeah.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you.